They called it a stupid online business until I made $10 million, pulled up to my sister's wedding in a G-wagon, and gave a speech so savage it made the golden child choke on her champagne. I was the forgotten son, the family's disappointment. While they paraded Sophie around like royalty, I was building an empire in silence. No one clapped when I succeeded, so I gave them a reason to never forget me. This isn't just about money. It's about payback, power, and proving that sometimes the one they laugh at becomes the one they can't stop watching. So, I was never the star of the family. That role was already taken before I even learned how to tie my shoes. My sister, Sophie, had been a prodigy since birth. Or at least that's what my parents loved to say. She walked at 8 months, read by 3, got straight A's without blinking, and somehow managed to be head cheerleader and valedictorian. She was their golden girl. I was just Ryan, the other kid. No matter what I did, it was never good enough. Not bad, just invisible. Growing up in a suburban neighborhood outside Chicago, we were a middle-class family who acted like royalty every time Sophie brought home another trophy. My mom would polish that damn glass cabinet in the hallway like it held the Holy Grail. Her debate medals, her piano recital ribbons, her soccer MVP plaques. It sparkled under the hallway light, a constant reminder of everything I wasn't. Meanwhile, the only thing I was good at was breaking apart our remote control cars and putting them back together. Faster, sometimes cooler. Once, I added LED strips to the wheels. My dad didn't even notice. One evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table working on a 3D printed phone stand I designed. I was proud of it. It was clean, sleek, even had a swivel mechanism. When I showed it to my dad, he glanced up from the TV, nodded slightly, and muttered, "Cool." Then he went back to watching the game. The next day, Sophie walked in with a scholarship offer from Yale. The house turned into a freaking carnival. I stood in the corner with my little phone stand and smiled like it didn't hurt. By the time high school rolled around, it was obvious I was on a different track. I wasn't dumb. Actually, I was pretty good at math and had a weird obsession with how algorithms worked. I taught myself coding on an old laptop my uncle gave me. When other kids were playing Call of Duty, I was on forums learning how to flip products on eBay and automate tasks with Python. But in my house, there was no glory in nerd stuff, unless it led to a degree from a top-tier university, and I had no interest in college. "I'm going to start an online business," I announced one night at dinner, junior year. My dad choked on his steak. My mom blinked like I had just declared I was joining a cult. Sophie giggled. "You mean like selling stuff on Instagram?" "No," I said calmly. "Like building a dropshipping store or a content site. There's money in automation, and I've already started learning SEO and affiliate marketing." Blank stares. My dad leaned back in his chair. "So, instead of going to college and getting a real job, you want to play pretend entrepreneur?" My mom sighed. "Ryan, sweetie, you're smart in your own way. But don't you think it's a little childish?" Sophie sipped her water, smirking. "Don't worry, Mom. He can run my fan pages when I become a corporate attorney." I didn't argue. I just nodded and stared down at my plate. That was my first lesson in letting actions speak louder than explanations. Senior year was brutal. Sophie graduated a semester early. My parents threw her a backyard party that looked like a Pinterest wedding. Fairy lights, custom cupcakes, a banner that read, "Our Shining Star." I handed out plates and watched from the sidelines. I graduated with average grades and no college plans. I told my parents I'd take a gap year to figure things out, you see, but I'd already made up my mind. I was going all in on my business. They weren't thrilled, but they didn't argue much either. At this point, they had pretty much written me off. "Just don't expect us to pay for your mistakes," my dad warned. "I won't," I replied. And I didn't. That summer, I worked part-time at a warehouse, loading trucks. It paid like crap, but I didn't care. Every dollar I earned went toward building my first Shopify store. I bought a cheap domain, set up basic branding, and researched winning products. I watched YouTube videos like they were religion. At night, I slept in the attic. My room was converted into Sophie's guest suite. The attic was hot, dusty, and barely had enough space for a bed and a desk, but it was mine. I set up a little corner with a laptop, a whiteboard, and sticky notes plastered across the walls. Fail faster. Add test data. No one cares, work harder. That last one hit the deepest. One night, I overheard my parents talking in the living room. I was walking down to grab a snack, but stopped when I heard my name. "He's just wasting time," my dad said. "I don't know what we did wrong with him." "We didn't do anything," my mom replied. "Some kids are just not wired for success." There was a pause. Then she said something that cracked something inside me forever. "At least we have Sophie." I stood frozen in the hallway. I didn't cry. I didn't walk in and scream. I just turned around and went back upstairs. That night, I stayed up until 4 a.m., launching my first ad campaign. It bombed. And then the next one did too. And the next. But I didn't stop. While my sister was vacationing in Europe after her internship at some prestigious law firm, I was figuring out why my abandoned cart rate was so high. While my dad posted proud photos of Sophie on Facebook, I was learning how to script voiceovers for faceless YouTube channels. I taught myself video editing, thumbnail creation, email marketing, and retargeting ads, all while pretending I was just chilling when my parents asked what I was doing. They didn't ask often. Eventually, I saved up enough to rent a tiny studio apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, peeling paint, noisy neighbors, but I didn't care. It had Wi-Fi and a door I could lock. I moved out on my 19th birthday, left a note on the kitchen table. Thanks for everything. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. Ryan. No one called that day, not even Sophie. And that was the day I made a promise to myself. I would never ask them for anything again. I wouldn't prove them wrong with words. I'd prove them wrong with results. They wouldn't see me coming, but one day they'd have no choice but to notice. The new apartment had cracks in the walls and smelled like mildew every time it rained, but to me, it was freedom. I had a mattress on the floor, a desk I found on Craigslist for $20, and my old laptop perched on top of a stack of cardboard boxes, pretending to be a second monitor stand. The place echoed when I walked because it was mostly empty, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. No more walking on eggshells, no more being compared to Sophie. No more side eyes at the dinner table when I mentioned anything outside of the real job pipeline. This was mine, even if I was broke. And God, was I broke. My dropshipping store had burned through the last of my warehouse money. I sold portable blenders and thought I was sitting on gold, but I underestimated everything. Shipping times, product quality, refunds. The ads barely broke even. And when I did get sales, they turned into support tickets faster than I could process them. One customer threatened to sue because their blender arrived shattered. Another left a 1-star review saying it smelled like fish. I laughed, then cried, then kept going. I picked up freelance gigs to survive. Basic website setup, logo designs, writing product descriptions, $10 here, $15 there. Some nights I ate toast for dinner. Other nights, just sleep. I didn't tell anyone. My parents assumed I was wasting away, probably watching Netflix all day in my underwear. I never corrected them. Let them think I was a joke. That just meant they wouldn't see the punchline coming. A few months in, I got an invite to Sophie's engagement dinner. It came in the form of a forwarded email from Mom with a passive-aggressive note. If you're not too busy with your little online thing, we'd love to see you for your sister's big night. Your little online thing. That line sat with me for hours. Not because it was the first time they mocked me, but because I realized they hadn't changed at all. Even now, they didn't ask how I was doing. Not once. Just another invitation to stand in the background and clap for the golden child. I didn't respond. That week, I went viral. I had quietly been building a faceless YouTube channel on the side. Voiceovers, stock footage, daily uploads, nothing fancy. But I had learned enough about the algorithm to know what clicked. I posted a video titled, "This Man Built a $1 Million Empire from His Garage." It was about a 23-year-old tech founder who bootstrapped his business from scratch. I edited it like it was a movie trailer. Hooked the audience in the first 5 seconds. Tight pacing, strong CTA. 3 days later, it hit 1.2 million views. My AdSense revenue tripled overnight. Emails poured in. I got affiliate clicks, channel subs. I checked my phone in disbelief as my first video crossed $3,000 in passive income. I sat on the floor of that tiny apartment, hands shaking, staring at the number. $3,000 for one video, and I had 20 more scheduled. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I ordered a medium pepperoni pizza, the first non-toast meal I'd had in weeks, and watched my earnings go up while I ate. Then I got back to work. By the end of the month, I had earned just under $10,000. I reinvested every penny, bought better gear, outsourced editing, scaled up my content pipeline. I found a team overseas who helped me launch 2 more channels. I still lived in that tiny apartment. I still wore the same 3 shirts. Still answered Fiverr gigs. But quietly, I was building something unstoppable. Then came Thanksgiving. I hadn't been home in nearly a year. Sophie was apparently now working at a top law firm. Her wedding was in the planning stages, and she was flying first class to DC every other week. I only knew because Mom still updated her Facebook like she was managing a celebrity fan page. I got a call from Dad the day before Thanksgiving. It was short. "Your mother wants you to come. Don't make things awkward." Click. I didn't owe them anything, but part of me, maybe the stupid, loyal part, felt like I had something to prove, so I went. The moment I walked in the door, it was like I had stepped into an alternate reality. Sophie was front and center, radiant as ever, holding court with a glass of wine and that smug little smirk she always wore when she felt invincible. "Wow," she said when she saw me. "You clean up okay. Didn't know you could afford shoes." I smiled. "They were on sale. After I bought the factory." She blinked. Mom came up and gave me a weird side hug, like she wasn't sure whether to be happy or embarrassed. "Still doing that YouTube thing?" she asked like it was a disease. "Among other things," I replied. Dad grunted. "Just hope you're saving up for a real job. This influencer nonsense won't last forever. Sophie giggled. Didn't you have like an online blender shop or something? I laughed. Yeah, that flopped. Then I started 3 companies that didn't. How's that law firm treating you? Do they let you have weekends off? That wiped the grin off her face for a second. Just a flicker, but I saw it. They still thought I was a joke, but jokes have punchlines. Later that night, I sat by the fireplace while Sophie showed off her ring to relatives. I scrolled through my dashboard. $31,845.37 monthly revenue. 219K subscribers across 3 channels. 5 clients booked for my media consulting service. 1 NDA pending with a major e-commerce brand. I put my phone away and helped myself to another slice of pie. Across the room, Sophie laughed extra loud at some story she was telling. Dad refilled her wine like she was royalty. Mom beamed like she was watching her legacy unfold. And me? I was the joke of the family. But the thing about jokes is, the smart ones always remember the setup, and they're the only ones who know exactly when to deliver the punchline. The night after Thanksgiving, I drove back to the city in silence. No music, no podcasts. Just me and the hum of the engine and the icy wind tapping against the windows. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt anymore. That part of me had gone quiet. Like a radio station that used to buzz in the background but lost its signal. I was focused because deep down, I had realized something critical. They weren't going to change. And I didn't need them to. The next 6 months were a blur. I turned into a machine. Every morning started at 5 a.m. with a cup of instant coffee and my notebook. Not a fancy productivity app, just a $2 notebook with one heading at the top. What moves the needle today? That was my mantra. No fluff, no busy work, just needle-moving actions. While the world scrolled Instagram, I wrote video scripts, edited content for all 3 YouTube channels, scaled my faceless automation system, built landing pages and tested split ad variations, hired freelancers, and trained a virtual assistant, and quietly launched a 4th income stream digital products. I took everything I learned about building YouTube automation channels and packaged it into a sleek step-by-step Notion course, sold it for $49. It was basic, just a Google Doc with links and videos, but it brought in over $1,200 in the first week with 0 ad spend. Then I raised the price. I reinvested relentlessly. Instead of bawling out like most people my age would, I doubled down. Bought better mic setups, upgraded my editing software, paid a thumbnail artist who charged $150 a pop, but whose work doubled my click-through rate. I went from uploading daily to running 5 content machines with upload schedules mapped out 2 months in advance. Everything was systemized, automated, streamlined. I tracked KPIs like a man possessed. By spring, I had hit $20K/month in passive revenue, built a Discord community of 3,000 aspiring creators, signed a $12K/month retainer to help a client scale their channel, and been invited to speak on a YouTube growth podcast with 800K listeners. And not a single person in my family knew. They still thought I was figuring life out. Sophie had posted on Facebook that I was doing freelance work and trying to find direction. My mom commented something like, "We're praying he finds his purpose." They had no clue I was building an empire from a secondhand desk and an Amazon ring light. And I wanted it that way, because the more invisible I was to them, the more I could move in silence. Let them write my obituary early. Let them bury me with their expectations. I wasn't just grinding. I was plotting. I upgraded my apartment in May. A 2-bedroom loft downtown. Exposed brick, high ceilings, massive windows. Nothing crazy, but to me it was a symbol. A marker of what hard work could do when no one's watching. The landlord looked at me sideways when I handed him 6 months' rent up front. "You're what, 20? 21, I said, but I've been paying bills since I was 16. He didn't ask more. Good. That summer, I met Leah again. She was my neighbor growing up. One of the only people who actually treated me like a human when Sophie was busy sucking up all the air in the room. She'd moved back to town after college, working remotely for a design agency. We ran into each other at a bookstore of all places. I was there looking for a branding book. She was browsing the fiction section. "Ryan," she said, blinking in surprise, "you look different. Hopefully better." "Definitely better," she laughed. We got coffee, then lunch, then a drink, then brunch. Soon, she was crashing at my place more often than not, curled up with her laptop on the couch while I worked at my desk. She never asked how much money I made. She only asked how I felt doing what I did. No one had ever asked me that before. Meanwhile, Sophie's wedding prep was in full swing. I heard through a cousin that the guest list was nearly 200 people. Black tie only. The venue was some historic estate, outside the city with a dance floor under a glass dome. My invitation came in a matte envelope with gold calligraphy. I almost laughed when I opened it. A handwritten note from Mom was tucked inside. "We hope you can make it. Everyone would love to see how far you've come." It wasn't kindness, it was bait. They didn't care how far I'd come. They just wanted to parade me around and point at the weird one who turned out okay. I tossed the invite on my desk, and then I got an idea. That night, I sat down with Leah and showed her my business dashboard. She scrolled, her eyes widened. "This is you? All of this?" I nodded. She grinned. "So what's next, Mr. Underground Millionaire?" I leaned back in my chair and stared at the invitation. "Next," I said, "we go to that wedding. And I ruined their fairy tale just by existing. Because here's the thing about silent success. It echoes loudest when you walk into a room full of people who thought you were a failure. And I was about to walk into the loudest room of them all. Success doesn't make noise right away. In the beginning, it whispers in email pings, in cleared invoices, in notifications that read, "Payment received." It shows up in early mornings, in unopened texts from people who used to ignore you, and in the calm confidence of being absolutely sure you're building something that matters. That was my life now. And the silence from my family, it didn't just continue, it got worse. I hadn't heard from Sophie in over 4 months. "No. How are you doing?" "No. What have you been working on?" The last I saw of her was in a random LinkedIn post where she announced she was officially joining a prestigious law firm. Hundreds of likes. Comments calling her an inspiration. My mom shared it with a caption that said, "Proud doesn't even begin to cover it." Meanwhile, I had just crossed $150,000 in profit that month alone. But the only people who knew were my accountant, Leah, and a few close teammates I worked with across time zones. I didn't post about it, didn't brag, didn't screenshot dashboards or bank balances, because I wasn't chasing attention. I was chasing legacy. One of my channels hit 1 million subscribers in March. YouTube mailed me the gold play button. I stared at it for 5 minutes, then packed it right back in the box. I wasn't ready to hang it up. Not yet. Not until the people who said I'd never be anything had to see it in person. And not until it would hurt just enough. Leah moved in with me around that time. We never officially said the words, it just kind of happened. Her lease ended and I offered. She said yes, and the apartment finally felt less like a workspace and more like a life. She designed a minimalist studio corner in the guest room with soft lighting, earthy tones, and live plants I was certain I'd kill in a week. I built a custom standing desk for her. She painted a skyline mural above mine. We didn't post anything. We didn't make a big deal out of it. We just worked, built, ate, slept, loved. And slowly, the idea of family started to shift in my mind. One night, I got an email from a Forbes contributor. He was doing a piece on modern creators who had turned faceless brands into million-dollar businesses. Apparently, someone from my Discord community had pitched me anonymously. "Your story is unreal," the email said. "Would love to include you if you're open to it." I agreed. We talked for an hour. I told him everything from my first failed store to the night I overheard my parents calling me a lost cause. He didn't ask about revenge or family drama. He asked about resilience. That's the moment I realized this story wasn't just mine. It was for every kid who ever got laughed at for dreaming differently. The article dropped a few weeks later. Front page of Forbes' Young Founders to Watch column. Title: From Rejection to Millions, How One 21-Year-Old Built a Content Empire in Silence. I didn't expect it to blow up, but it did. Twitter, LinkedIn, Reddit, TikTok. People clipped quotes from it, stitched it into motivational videos, tagged their friends. And then I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in years. "Sophie, just saw the article. Wow, you really built all this?" I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to leave her on read. Another part wanted to send a sarcastic gif and keep it moving. But I didn't do either. I replied with 2 words: "Still building." That same week, my mom texted for the first time in nearly 6 months. "Saw the article, congratulations." We had no idea. "Sophie's bridal party is coming up. Would love for you to come by and say a few words at the reception." There it was. We had no idea. I smiled bitterly. They had every opportunity to know. I had eaten cold toast while they celebrated Sophie's internships. I had walked home in the snow from warehouse shifts while they threw catered parties in her honor. They had every chance to ask me how I was doing. They just didn't care to. I didn't answer for a week. Then Leah caught me staring at the message while we were at dinner. "Go," she said. I looked up. "To the party?" She nodded. "Why not?" "Because it's a trap. They don't want me there for me. They want me there so I can be part of the decoration." "Then don't go for them," she said. "Go for you. You earned your silence. Now earn the right to be seen." That stuck with me, so I replied to Mom, "I'll be there." I arrived at the bridal party in a black-on-black designer suit that fit like it had been made in a lab for me. Because it had. I stepped out of a jet black McLaren 720S. I bought 6 weeks prior, not because I wanted to flex, but because I could. And because I once overheard my dad say, "He'll never afford a bicycle, let alone a real car." Leah stepped out beside me in a deep red dress that made every head in the parking lot turn. We walked up the marble steps hand in hand. Inside, the room buzzed with chatter, old friends, distant cousins, familiar faces I hadn't seen since high school. When I walked through the door, Everything slowed down. I watched as Sophie's smile faltered for just a second. Watched my dad's drink pause halfway to his mouth. Watched my mom blink like she couldn't quite recognize the man standing in front of her. The first words out of Sophie's mouth, "Whoa, since when did you become Batman?" I laughed. I was always Batman. Just didn't have the suit yet. She tried to recover with a hug. It was stiff, weird, like hugging a coworker you secretly hate. Dad clapped me on the back and forced a smile. "Look at you, Mr. Big Shot." "Forbes, huh?" I nodded. "Still building." Mom touched my shoulder gently. "We're proud of you. We really are." I didn't say thank you, because they weren't proud. They were confused. Confused how the kid they mocked had just stolen the entire spotlight from their star daughter without even trying. And I hadn't said a single word on the mic yet. Power doesn't feel like thunder. It doesn't announce itself in shouts or fireworks or standing ovations. Real power is quiet. It's the calm in the way people look at you differently, like they know something's shifted but can't put their finger on it. It's the silence that follows when you enter a room, and the way people listen closely when you speak, even if you're not saying much at all. That's what the party felt like. I didn't need to flex. I didn't need to say, "Look at me," because for once they all already were. After the party, things moved fast. My DMs exploded. College friends I hadn't spoken to in years, family members who ignored my birthdays, even some old teachers reached out after the Forbes article. Suddenly, I was that kid who made it. The one who always had potential. Funny how everyone becomes a believer once the proof is impossible to ignore. I didn't answer most of them. Instead, I poured even more energy into my brand. Launched a podcast. Grew my newsletter to 50,000 plus subscribers in a month. Partnered with 2 rising YouTubers to build an entire creator incubator that automated production for new faceless channels. Every move I made was intentional. Every system was tighter, faster, cleaner. By summer, I crossed $1 million in net profit. At 22, and I still hadn't told my parents. One afternoon in June, I got a call from a venture capitalist in San Francisco. She was sharp, charming, and extremely well prepared. "We've been watching your channels," she said. "You've cracked a system very few people understand." She offered me $3 million for a 30% stake in one of my content companies, plus more if I agreed to build a course under their brand umbrella. It was tempting. The money was real. The exposure could be huge. But I thought about everything I'd built. I thought about the cold toast nights, the attic, the long hours editing videos while the world laughed at me, the silence from my family, the complete ownership I'd fought tooth and nail to protect. So I asked her a single question. "If I say no, do I still get to keep your respect?" She laughed. "More of it, actually." I passed. I walked away from $3 million because I didn't need validation anymore. I was the one writing the rules now. A week later, I signed the paperwork on a penthouse. 30 floors up, glass walls overlooking the skyline. It wasn't a flex move, it was a chapter marker. I had been in the shadows long enough, and the next chapter would be written in daylight. That's when the invitation came. Not a forwarded email this time. Not a last-minute call, sure. An actual handwritten letter. Sophie's wedding. Black tie affair, formal venue, champagne tower, the whole thing. At the bottom, in gold ink, one sentence stood out. "We would be honored if you gave a toast." I almost laughed when I read it. Not because they wanted me to speak, but because they clearly had no idea what I'd say. Leah read it over my shoulder and grinned. "This is it," she said. "The final act." I nodded. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about proving them wrong anymore. It was about showing them who I'd become, and doing it so effortlessly, so elegantly, that they'd feel the weight of everything they missed, everything they mocked, everything they dismissed without me ever having to raise my voice. 2 days before the wedding, I went shopping. Not online. Not some drop-shipped suit from a random brand. I went in person to a boutique tailor who served athletes and CEOs. I told him I needed something sharp, something timeless. Something that didn't scream money, just whispered it confidently. He understood immediately. When I stepped out of the dressing room, Leah just shook her head and said, "You're gonna break some hearts." I smirked. "Only the right ones." On the morning of the wedding, I got a text from my dad. "Looking forward to seeing you today. Can't believe how far you've come, son." For the first time in years, he'd called me son. But I knew it wasn't about me. It was about them, about how they could now proudly claim me, now that I was headline-worthy. Still, I didn't respond. I needed my silence more than he needed my approval. This wasn't a reunion. It was a reckoning. We pulled up to the wedding in a silver Mercedes AMG G-wagon. I wore the tailored black suit with a slate gray tie and cufflinks shaped like tiny infinity symbols. Leah wore an emerald green dress with a slit that could have started riots. As we walked into the venue, heads turned. Not just because of the car, not just because of the outfits, but because energy doesn't lie. People feel it when you walk with purpose. They notice when someone moves like they've already won. The wedding venue looked like a movie set. Cherry blossom centerpieces, a live string quartet, champagne flutes lining every wall. Sophie stood at the center like royalty, in a designer gown worth more than most people's cars. She turned when she saw me. And for the first time in her life, she was speechless. "Ryan," she said softly. "You look," I waited, "different," she finished. I smiled. "I've always been this guy. You just never noticed." Mom and Dad came over next. Mom reached for a hug. Dad did that awkward handshake pat combo dads do when they don't know how to express feelings. "We're so proud of you," Dad said. "Really, you've done good, kid." That used to mean the world to me. Now, it barely registered, because I knew that pride only showed up after success, not during the struggle, not when I needed it most, not when I was building something alone in the dark. But I smiled anyway. "Thanks," I said, "means a lot," even if it didn't. Dinner passed in a blur of soft jazz, overcooked steak, and polite small talk with strangers. People asked me what I did. "I build digital systems," I'd say simply. "Mostly online." That was enough to make their eyes light up. Everyone wants to understand, but no one really does. And that was fine by me. The less they knew, the more powerful the mystery became. Eventually, the DJ's voice echoed across the hall. "Now, a special toast from the bride's brother." The room went quiet. I stood, picked up the mic, and walked slowly to the center. I didn't clear my throat, didn't tap the mic. I just started talking. The moment I stood up with that mic in my hand, time slowed. Every eye in the ballroom turned toward me, some with curiosity, some with confusion. A few with recognition, the kind that says, "Wait, isn't that the brother who is doing something online?" Sophie's smile froze mid-laugh. Dad leaned forward in his seat. Mom placed her wine glass down gently. Leah gave me the smallest nod from across the table. I didn't write a speech. I didn't need one. Every word I was about to say had been carved into me through years of silence, mockery, and lonely wins. I looked around the room, smiled politely, and began. "For most of my life, I've been known as Sophie's brother." Chuckles echoed softly around the room, which, let's be honest, is a pretty great role to have. She's smart, accomplished, driven, and, judging by tonight, very good at planning extravagant weddings. More laughter now. People relaxed slightly. They thought I was going for a classic safe toast. They had no idea what was coming. Growing up, Sophie got trophies. I got hand-me-down science kits. She was the pride of the house. I was a background character. Sophie's smile twitched. And that was okay. I didn't understand it at the time, but being underestimated is a gift. When no one's watching, you can build without pressure. You can experiment, fail, fall flat on your face, and no one notices because no one expects anything. The room was dead silent. I made eye contact with my parents. Dad shifted in his seat. So while Sophie went to law school, I went somewhere else into the unknown. Into digital spaces most people think are scams or just hobbies. I worked 16-hour days for years. I got laughed at, mocked, ignored, even by people in this very room. My voice didn't rise. I didn't sound bitter. I just spoke clearly, calmly, like someone reading a journal entry out loud. They called what I did a joke, a phase, a waste of time. And that was fine, because I was building something bigger than their understanding. And tonight, I want to thank those people, truly. Now everyone was listening. Because without that silence, without that dismissal, I might have never found out what I was really capable of. I built a company that reaches millions. I employ people around the world. I own every inch of what I created, and I did it without applause, without help, without a single "we believe in you" from the people who were supposed to give it. The words hung in the air like thick smoke. Sophie's face was blank now, frozen in a perfect practice smile that didn't reach her eyes. But I'm not angry. This isn't a gotcha moment, because the truth is all of this, all of me, exists because of you. So, thank you. I looked at my mother. Thank you for ignoring my wins. Then my father. Thank you for warning me not to waste my life. And finally, I looked at Sophie. And thank you for taking all the attention. Because in the silence you left behind, I found focus. No one made a sound. Even the waitstaff had paused. I raised my glass to Sophie, the golden girl. And to the quiet kid in the corner who turned out just fine. Clink. And I sat down. The applause was hesitant, scattered, then louder. Some guests didn't know whether to clap or pretend they hadn't heard what they just heard. Others smiled uncomfortably. Mom looked like she'd swallowed glass. Dad was staring into his drink. Sophie sat still, eyes locked on the centerpiece. Leah reached under the table and gently squeezed my hand. "You okay?" she whispered. I nodded. "That wasn't for them," she smiled. "I know." Later, Sophie pulled me aside. You could have just said congratulations and sat down, you know." I looked at her. For the first time in years, really looked. She wasn't the golden girl anymore. She was a person. Just a person. And for once, she knew it. "I could have," I said. "But that would have been a lie." Her jaw tightened. "You think this party makes you better than everyone?" "No," I said. "I think this party proves that I never needed anyone's permission to be who I am." She didn't respond. Duh. She just walked away. That night, I stood on the balcony of the penthouse, looking down at the city that once felt too big for me. I thought about that attic, that toast, that silence. And I knew something had changed, not in them, but in me. I didn't need their praise anymore. I didn't need to prove anything. It's because I wasn't the forgotten son. I was the one who wrote his own story. And made the whole world read it. The day after Sophie's wedding, I didn't wake up feeling victorious. No parade, no confetti, no dramatic score playing in my head. Just quiet. A different kind of quiet than I'd known before. Not the cold, dismissive silence of my parents' living room growing up. No. This silence was warm, clean, earned. I walked barefoot across the hardwood floors of the penthouse, coffee in hand, sunlight spilling through the tall windows like liquid gold. Leah was curled up on the couch, still half asleep, wearing one of my oversized t-shirts and scrolling through her phone. "Any fires to put out?" she mumbled. I shook my head. "Just a lot of congratulations." I'd woken up to a tidal wave of messages. Guests from the wedding, people I hadn't spoken to in years, even a few reporters. Apparently, someone had recorded my speech and uploaded it to TikTok. Within 12 hours, it had hit 2.3 million views. Guy gives savage toast at sister's wedding and silences the whole room. The comments were wild, mostly support, some confusion, a handful calling me petty. But none of it mattered anymore. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't need any of it. I didn't need to clap back. Didn't need to post a victory lap. Didn't even need to watch the video. I had said what I came to say, and that was it. But not everyone left it there. My mom called that afternoon. I let it ring. Then my dad. Then a text from Sophie. "I get it now. Doesn't mean I like how you did it, but I get it." That one I responded to. Took me years to get it too. No hard feelings. And I meant it. I really did. Because holding on to bitterness was just another version of the old life, the one where I needed their approval to feel seen. Now, I had me. That night, Leah and I ordered takeout and sat on the balcony. She looked at me between bites of orange chicken. "You feel done now?" I thought about it. The money was there. The respect was there. Even the closure. Yeah, that was there too. But done? "No," I said. "Not done, just different." She nodded. "What's next?" I smiled. I'd been thinking about that for a while. Because here's the truth no one tells you about hitting the top. If you climb the mountain just to prove something, it starts to feel empty once you're there. I had proved everything. I had built the empire, stood in the room that used to shrink me, said the truth in front of the people who ignored me. Now, the challenge wasn't climbing. It was choosing where to go next on purpose. So I started shifting. I sold off one of the content companies, not because I needed the cash, but because I wanted the space. I turned my attention to mentoring, quietly helping underdog creators who reminded me of younger versions of myself. Kids who couldn't afford fancy gear or private school or even support at home. I hosted private Zoom rooms, gave away strategy playbooks for free, and even funded 2 startups anonymously. I didn't post about it. Didn't watermark the good I was doing. Because I wasn't building for claps anymore. I was building for impact. Months passed. Sophie's law firm went through a merger and laid off half their staff. She survived the cuts, but word got around that she'd been passed up for a promotion. I didn't gloat. I didn't bring it up. She texted me one day randomly. "I still think you were a pain in the ass growing up, but maybe we both were. Maybe." We met up for lunch. No cameras, no spectacle. Just 2 adults who finally saw each other for who they really were, not who their parents had cast them to be. As for my parents, they never really apologized. But they changed in other ways. My mom started sending articles about creators making it big. She once sent me a link to my own podcast with the caption, "This guy sounds like you, LOL." Dad asked me over to help him set up a Shopify store for his woodwork. We weren't suddenly some picture-perfect family. We weren't hugging every Sunday, but the walls had started to soften, and I could live with that. One night, Leah and I sat on the couch, legs tangled, a bowl of popcorn between us, watching a documentary on self-made entrepreneurs. Halfway through, she looked at me and said, "You know, you could make a story like this about yourself." I grinned. "I already did." She raised an eyebrow, and I pointed to my chest. "Right here." Because this story, my story, didn't end on a stage with applause. It ended quietly. With peace. With purpose. With knowing that I had rewritten everything they said I couldn't do, not out of spite, but out of choice. The boy they mocked became the man they had to watch rise, not because he shouted, but because he never stopped moving. No applause necessary. Success is loud when you need it to be. When you've got something to prove to your parents, your past, your pain, success becomes your speaker system, your middle finger, your neon sign that says, "Look at me now." But after a while, when you've proven it all, success becomes a tool. Not for ego, not for clout, but for impact. That's where I was now. I'd already done the hard part. Built the systems, earned the numbers, lived the headlines. But sitting on top of $1 million business wasn't as satisfying as I thought it'd be. The views, the money, the Forbes covers, they filled a hole I used to carry in my chest. But now that hole was patched, healed, quiet, and something else started whispering. What are you going to do with all this? Whose story are you going to rewrite next? So I started building again, not for profit, but for people. I created a private accelerator program for creators with no safety net. I didn't advertise it, no flashy branding, Just a private form, and a single line at the top. If the world laughed at you, I want to help you make it pay attention. Within days, the inbox filled up. A single mom running a podcast out of her closet. A 19-year-old editing videos in a public library every night. A teacher trying to build a curriculum platform for underfunded schools. They weren't looking for a handout, just a shot. So I gave them one. Leah and I flew to meet one of them in person. A kid named Ezra, who had built a motivational TikTok account with over 200K followers, all using his mom's cracked iPhone 6. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment with 4 siblings and had been sleeping on the floor since he was 12. But he was hungry, sharp, obsessed with storytelling. I handed him a new MacBook, paid his rent for the year, and offered him a job as a junior editor on my new docuseries. He cried in front of me, not because of the gift, but because someone finally said, "You're good enough." It was the same thing I had craved for years, and now I got to give it over and over again. I invested in quiet startups, launched scholarships for kids interested in digital media, gave away revenue blueprints to single dads and college dropouts who reminded me of myself. The best part? None of it was on camera. No viral moments, no YouTube thumbnails with crying faces, just real help, quiet wins. Because legacy isn't built in front of an audience. It's built in the lives you change when nobody's watching. Sophie eventually reached out again. She had left the law firm, burnt out, disillusioned, tired of pretending to love a career that only looked good on paper. "I don't even know who I am without the job," she admitted over coffee one day. I didn't judge her, didn't gloat. Instead, I asked, "If you could build anything from scratch without worrying what people think, what would it be?" She blinked. No one had ever asked her that. A week later, she texted me a business plan. A startup, legal consulting for small creators helping protect their IP, avoid predatory brand deals, and navigate copyright. It was actually brilliant. So I funded her first 6 months. And no strings, no equity, just a belief. Maybe that was the real revenge, watching the golden child become free only after she finally stepped off the pedestal our parents had built. As for mom and dad, we weren't close, but we were civil. They'd started calling occasionally, asking about my projects, asking for advice. There were still awkward pauses, still clumsy attempts at connection. But there was effort now, and I respected that, because people don't change overnight. They grow, or they don't. But I wasn't waiting anymore. By the end of that year, I'd helped over 50 creators get off the ground. 20 of them were profitable. 5 were hiring. 1 had crossed 7 figures. And not one of them had a trust fund, a mentor, or a fancy internship on their resume. Just grit, just fire, just belief now, backed by someone who understood the hunger. One night, I asked Leah why she stuck around. We were sitting by the fire pit, watching the city glow beneath us. "You never asked me that before," she said. "I know," I replied. "I guess I just finally feel like I deserve the answer." She looked at me, serious and soft. "Because you didn't let their story become your ending. You made your own. And now you're giving that gift to everyone else." She leaned in. That's what real power looks like. And she was right. Power isn't about being the loudest. It's about lifting others when you no longer need to be lifted yourself. It's about choosing purpose after the pain fades. It's about looking in the mirror without the noise of your past or the weight of others' expectations and saying, "I'm exactly who I needed when I was younger." And that's the story worth telling. Not the money, not the fame, not the speech, but the quiet ripple of a legacy still growing. I never planned to be a public figure. In fact, I built most of my success behind the curtain faceless channels. Voiceovers by freelancers, companies registered under shell names. The spotlight, it was never the goal, but sometimes, when you build long enough in the dark, people can't help but notice when the light finally shines. I was at a community creator event in downtown LA. Nothing major. Just a grassroots awards night put together by a nonprofit I had anonymously donated to. They didn't know who I was. I didn't use my business name or real company titles on the sponsor list. I just wanted to support the event quietly and slip out before anyone even noticed. But fate had other plans. As I stood near the back, sipping lukewarm coffee in a paper cup, the host took the mic. "Tonight we have a surprise guest in the room. Someone whose story has impacted creators across the world, not through flashy branding or viral moments, but through real impact. Someone who's changed lives." Silently, I froze. We didn't know he'd be here tonight, but when we found out, we had to act. "Please welcome Ryan Mitchell, the one they forgot. The one who never forgot others." The room erupted. Spotlights turned, heads swiveled. Leah touched my arm. "You don't have to, if you don't want." But I was already walking toward the stage. I took the mic, looked out over the sea of faces. Young, hungry, bright-eyed, just like I'd been. I didn't prepare a speech, but I knew exactly what to say. I used to think revenge was the goal, that success meant proving everyone wrong. And I did that, quietly, successfully. But it wasn't enough, because the real goal isn't to prove anyone wrong. It's to prove the next generation right. To show the kid who's filming with a cracked phone, the girl whose parents say her channel's a waste of time, The guy working night shifts to afford a mic? That they're not crazy, they're just early. The room held its breath. I was the one they forgot. The one who didn't matter. The one with the stupid online business. And now, I'm the one helping others get remembered. So if no one else tells you this tonight, I see you. I believe in you. And your story matters. Applause thundered across the auditorium. Later that night, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. My mom, my dad, sitting on their old living room couch, watching a live stream of the event on an iPad. The message simply said, "We see you now. We're sorry we didn't before." I stared at it for a long time, not out of bitterness, not out of validation, but because something in me finally loosened. The next week, I was invited back to my old high school, the same one where teachers laughed at my business plan and handed me backup career brochures. I walked through the same hallways that used to feel like cages, and now they were just memories, small ones, from a world I'd outgrown. I gave a guest lecture to the senior class, told them the truth. Not the polished version, the real one, so about doubt, loneliness, mockery, grind, silence. And then I told them about freedom, ownership, impact, purpose. At the end, a quiet kid in the back raised his hand. What if no one believes in me? I smile. Then you do what I did. You believe anyway. Leah and I drove home that night in silence. The stars were out. The city lights flickered beneath us like a grid of possibility. She reached over and held my hand. "You've changed a lot of lives," she said softly. I looked at her. "Yeah," I replied, "including my own." The boy they mocked had disappeared long ago. In his place stood a man who didn't just build success. He built significance, not for applause, not for revenge, but because a legacy is the quiet echo of every life you've touched and the courage it took to believe in yourself when no one else did. That's the story they'll remember. The one they forgot, he became unforgettable.